Hello, everybody. Welcome to my Boomer Buddies podcast. We're old friends telling it like it was and is. Listen in as we cover various topics and share our boomer thoughts, experiences, and personalities while mercilessly giving each other the business. I am so excited today. We're doing a spotlight on one of my boomer buddies, Quincy Stringham. I have self-labeled him the ultimate baby boomer. Welcome, Quincy. Tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how we got to know each other.
Hi, Rick. I'm calling you from Chicago, where I live in downtown Chicago. And I see I'm in the basement of my house. It was built in 1886 with all the problems that come with that and all the good things that come with that. So I know it looks like I'm in the bowels of the Titanic, but it's really just my basement man cave. So Rick and I have known each other. I was probably since like mid 90s, right? It's right in there, I would think.
Yeah, late 90s. Yeah,
late 90s,
97, 98.
And I walked up to him at his For the Record board game booth at the basement of the Javits Center and his rock and roll trivia game. And because considering myself somewhat of an expert on the subject, I couldn't help but stand there and kind of look and see what he was doing. I was had a sales rep business located out of Salt Lake City, which is where I lived at the time. And so I just stood there and watched, and eventually Rick saw me lurking there and was asking people questions as they sauntered by and try to get their attention and ultimately to buy his game to carry in their stores. And he said to me, can I ask you a question? And I said, sure. And he asked me a piece of rock and roll trivia, and I answered the question. He says, okay, can I ask you another one? I said, okay. He asked me another one. I answered it. And this went on for, I don't know, half dozen, 6, 7 questions. And I answered all the questions. And I said, well, when he's going to get to the hard ones, you know? And finally he looked at me, he says, who the hell are you? And how do you know all this stuff? And I said, well,
pretty good. You're pretty good.
I said, well, I know several things. I know about baseball, and I know about rock and roll, and I know about toys. And so here I am. That's what I do. I just happen to know all these things. And so we talked. He says, and what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I have a sales rep business that covers all the 7 intermountain states. And he says, in other words, you sell toys to the stores. I said, that's what I do. He says, Rick said, you and I need to talk. So we talked, and I ended up coming on board and selling his game in our firm and around those big square states out west that people back east don't think anybody actually lives in, but people actually do live there, and they bought his game. And then I even took it on the road with me. I was doing some operational work with a rolling review of rock and roll review of Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper that traveled all across country. And I spent a lot of time in the Midwest, and I actually one of the things I was in charge of was all the merchandising for the operation. And so I included the For the Record board game in our merchandise booth. And, we'd sell, reasonable amount, and every time we came through Minnesota every year, and Rick and Sharon would drive over to, St. Cloud?
St. Cloud.
And, and resupply me with that. So there was free shipping. So bring him over to the trunk of his car in the middle of January. Say, here you go.
We'd get to watch the show, the Winter Dance Party.
And we let you in free, I'm sure, right? I hope.
Absolutely. And we helped you at the table a little bit, too.
Yeah, that's right. Tried to, move some games. So, so we've had and we've just stayed in touch. That was between 2000 and 2008. And then we've stayed in touch. We kind of had a dry spell where we didn't get, I got remarried and moved to Chicago from Salt Lake City. And then we got in touch just a few years ago again, and just checked in to make sure that's how we were doing. And here we are today. So.
Yeah. Now, I call you the ultimate baby boomer, and the listening and viewing audience might go, well, why is he the ultimate baby boomer? Well, first of all, you're from the tier 1 of the baby boomers. You were born between 1946 and 54.
Yeah.
And I'm second tier, 1955 to 1964. So you were cutting edge. You were in the cutting edge generation of the baby boomers.
Right.
And and you have a lot of great memories. You can talk to me, and I know most of what you're talking about, and I can talk to you, and you know what I'm talking about, what we
Yeah.
went through. And, cars, sex, and rock and roll was
Right.
basically our era, right?
Right.
And so I look up to you in many respects. You are a musician. You've been a musician for years, correct?
Right. Right.
Uh, you sent me a couple of T-shirts from the band when you were out in Utah, the Gray Dogs, and it's the best T-shirt I ever had. I wore holes through both of them. And you are still playing music in the
Right.
Chicago area,
Right. I have
country now.
a band called the Lonesome Whippoorwills, which you may think is a terrible name for a band, but it's actually a line from "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry" by Hank Williams. And
Yeah,
our
yeah.
music basically starts about at Hank Williams and goes forward to, Chris Stapleton or whoever the current, whatever. So we have a 50, 60 year spread. And if somebody wants us to play the Stones or Tom Petty or whatever, we can do that because we've all played since we were 12 years old and, pretty much played most of the genres over the years. And we've just kind of settled on this kind of mishmash of, country flavored rock and country. It's because it's fun. But we do have a definite twang factor.
Yeah. So Quincy is the ultimate baby boomer just by experience. And I'm jealous because he is still a musician and plays. I've always wanted to be a musician, but I'm not. So I'm kind of jealous. And the other thing is, Quincy actually did something that I tell people I did, but I didn't really. I was 12 years old in 1969, and I tell people I went to Woodstock. Quincy actually did go to Woodstock, and it's a great story how you were able to go. Do you care sharing that with the listeners and viewers, Quincy?
Sure,
Great
sure,
story.
sure. I was just finished my sophomore year in college, and I grew up in the suburbs of New York City. It was about 150 miles from Woodstock, or from Bethel, which is where it was held. So it was just over the Hudson River and just upstate a little ways, so it wasn't very far away, really. And the rumors started coming down that this event was happening, and a bunch of my friends and I said, "Oh, this would be cool. We should go to this." And eventually, it was on, then it was off, then it was on, then it was in a different place, and we didn't have really any hopes that it was actually going to happen. And then eventually they started advertising on the local top 40 stations, and they had tickets available. So most of the guys just kind of dropped out of the picture about doing it. But my one friend, Bert, and I said, we're going to go. So we went up and we actually paid our $17 for the weekend, package ticket, so I actually one of the people that bought a ticket. And so we had the tickets and everything set. Bert volunteered to take his car, which I thought was a great idea. So I figured there might be the car might not, there might be problems with, there might be, you never know what would happen to the car. So he was volunteered, and I thought, that's great. And he had this beat up, he had a red Mustang convertible, which I know sounds great, but this thing was a beater. I mean, this thing had been through the wars. He got this used, and it sounds better than it was, but it was still cool. Still a car. It's still a Mustang convertible, right? So we took that up, and we were going to take that up. Now everything was fine. I was 19 years old. I was an adult, right? Of age. I could just go do it. I didn't need anybody's permission, but I did have a good relationship with my parents. And I was a good son, good kid, and so my dad was a semi-professional musician. He's a piano player. He played all the greatest hits of the 30s and 40s. He could sit down and play for an hour and a half without stopping, and so he got it. He understands music, and so I did. I thought, well, just as a courtesy, I'm going to tell my dad. Oh, by the way, Bert and I are going up to this music festival, and August whatever it was, 15th or whatever it was, and I didn't anticipate any problems at all. Except my dad said, I don't think this is such a great idea. I don't think you should go. And apparently he remembered being 19 a little too well, and himself. And I was shocked that he didn't think this was a great idea. But anyway, Woodstock is now 3 weeks away or so, and we have the tickets. I've invested money in this, and Bert is counting on me going, and I have to go. So my dad and I went the rounds for about 10 days, and we'd have this conversation almost every night. And he was intractable, and I was, I wouldn't give up. So one night, I just happened to say, Dad, if you were my age, and Louis Armstrong and Tommy Dorsey and Glenn Miller were playing 150 miles from your house, and that's about as far as that's as far as I got. And he just cut me off, and he says, oh, yeah, okay, go, but behave yourself.
Yeah.
But behave yourself.
Yeah.
Don't get in any trouble. I said, don't worry, I won't get in any trouble. And I didn't get in any trouble. I had some adventures for sure, but yeah. And I just needed something that he could relate to. And so
do you still have the ticket stub?
Of course not. No, but I do know what happened to them, because, I was in the mud and the wet and the water and all that stuff, and I had on my jeans, my Levi 501s. By the way, I was going to college out in the West. I went to college in Utah, and out there, all the kids wore Levi 501 jeans with the button fly, which didn't exist on the East Coast in 1968 and 69. They were still wearing quote unquote denims on the East Coast, And so I was always unique in high school and college and high school and stuff back there, because I was the only kid in our school that wore Levi 501 shrink to fit jeans with the button fly. And all the guys found that button fly thing. They couldn't believe that my pants had button flies. I was more interested in what the girls thought about that, but I don't have any idea what they thought. But anyway, That was my trademark, was those pants. But anyway, so I wore those pants up there and up, of course. And when I remember coming home, when I finally got home at the end of the weekend, and I remember taking those pants off and getting to jump in the shower or whatever, and the pants are filthy and wet and dirty and all that. And I'm cleaning out the pockets, and I reach in my back right pocket, and I pull out this crumpled up wad of cardboard, because of course we didn't need the tickets, right? They didn't collect them.
Right.
So I had them, and I remember looking down at them, and they were recognizable, but they're all wet and crumpled and wadded up. And I thought, maybe I should keep these, but no, I remember I threw them away. Yeah. So it's one of those kick me moments, 20 years later.
Well, Quincy, luckily, history has been kind to you as the ultimate baby boomer, and you do have proof that you were there. And
that's true.
Let us show the audience. If you're listening in, there's a Woodstock movie poster that's on the video screen right now. And Quincy, you want to tell us where you are in the audience?
Well,
sea of madness.
Yeah, unless you're colorblind, I'm easy to find, because if you look to the right-hand side of the screen and you see the guy standing up with the blue T-shirt, the bright blue T-shirt on, that's me.
Okay, I'm going to zoom in. There's Quincy right there.
Just on the right there, with his holding my jacket and my other hand on my left hip, with the blue shirt.
Okay. Now let's dig a little deeper, Quincy. You are there. Do you remember what you were thinking at that moment?
Yeah, I think I got a zero. I mean, I don't know exactly when that. I don't have proof of when it was, but I have a feeling it was when I had to get back. I had promised. I had a summer job that I'd had for 5 years, and they were nice. It was at the local small grocery store in my town, and the manager, gave me Friday off so I could get up there, and so I had Friday and Saturday off, which was unheard of. And of course, all the stores were closed on Sunday in those days, so that wasn't an issue. But I promised him that I would be back to work at 8:00 on Monday morning to load the produce off the streets of New York and set up the produce department with Frankie and Johnny, the two produce guys. So I had to get back. And of course, the festival was running late. And, and the Bert who I went with, was his main goal going up there was to see Jimi Hendrix, who, of course, was closing the whole show. He was supposed to close the show on Sunday night. Well, this was Sunday at about 5:00 rolled around. And with all the delays, we could see that Hendrix was not going to be playing anytime soon. And he, in fact, did play at like 9:00 the next morning. But my sense of responsibility kicked in, and I said, we got to go. And he said, no, I'm not leaving. I need to see Hendrix. And I said, okay. So I said, well, okay, I'll see you at home. I got to go. So I packed up my jacket, probably you see there, and the stuff I had on Side Hill where I'd been sitting for 3 days with some friends. We actually ran into some friends from our town as when we got there, and they already had a place to sit, so they invited us to sit. We were sitting about a third of the way up the hill. We had great seats, but I pretty much spent the weekend right there, and so I packed up what I had, and we had set up a tent about a mile or two away on the Route 17, just on in a field with some other tents. And so I thought, well, I said, I'm just going to go pick up a few things there. And then Bert, he said he'd bring the rest back in his car so I could travel light. So I headed that way. And, it was like watching a refugee movie from World War II, with all the kids on the street heading back to home at that point. They were starting to leave. And except the hair was a lot longer and the clothes were a lot more colorful than they were in those World War II movies. So, but anyway, I walked about 15 minutes and I thought, this is ridiculous. The closest place is Monticello, New York, that has a bus station. I see all these thousands of kids heading that way. They're all going to want to take the bus, probably. A lot of them will. And then how many buses can there be from Monticello, New York to New York on a Sunday night, Yeah. So the chances of me actually getting out of here on my own is slim and none. And so I thought, I guess I'm screwed. So I turned around, went back to the hillside, and then it took me about 15 minutes to figure out where the heck I've been sitting, because it came in from a little different angle. And I think that's when answer your question in a long way, I think that's where that picture was taken, because I think I'm looking for where I had sat before. And
Gotcha.
And so I finally found it after another 10 or 15 minutes looking around in where I thought was the vicinity, and the other guys were there, but Bert wasn't there. And I go, well, where's Bert? And they go, oh, well, he got feeling guilty too, because he had a Monday morning job too. And he said, oh gosh, I guess I better get back too. So he said, I'll just hustle back in. I'll meet him at the campsite while he's picking up. And so he and I crossed. He was leaving and I was coming back. So I hustled back to where we'd parked the car, and I found it. And all I found was an empty space. And I asked some people, I said, where's the guy with the red car and the pup tent? And he said, oh yeah, man, he just left about 10 minutes ago. He said he came back and you weren't around, and he said, I guess you'd already been here. So he just packed up and took off. So I missed him like by 10 or 15 minutes.
Oh,
so
how did you end up getting back?
Well, Monticello, New York is 20 miles from Bethel. And there's only one way to get there. You go down Route 17. It's a 2-lane rural highway, up in upstate in the Catskill Mountains. And I just started walking, and with the rest of the people, and I hopped on the back of a pickup truck at one point. I hopped on the back of like a 57 Chrysler with the huge fins. Remember those?
Yeah.
And which you could hang on to. And I sat on the trunk and hung on for dear life onto these fins. And the thing was only going 10 miles an hour, so it wasn't that difficult. So I did get a ride part of the way, but I walked most of the way. And I rolled into Monticello at about 12 o'clock at night. And I found the bus station. And I thought, well, this is going to be like, a refugee center, and I'll just stay here for 3 days till I can get a bus. And I'll be damned. I walked in and walked up, found a ticket thing, and got in line, got a ticket. They said, oh yeah, there's a bus leaving at 3 a.m. I said, you're kidding me. And so I bought a ticket. I couldn't believe it. I got a ticket to New York at 3 a.m. on this bus.
Wow.
And so I jumped in the bus, proceeded to fall asleep, I think, and woke up at the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan, and had to get over to Grand Central to catch the train up to my town, about 20 miles north of New York City. And that's the first time I realized that this was a big event, because there was no newspapers. We didn't have telephones that we called. We'd hear an occasional announcement that we're in the news, and this is like we're the the second biggest city in New York or whatever it was, but we weren't really paying that much attention to that. Didn't know it was a historical event. But I got in the cab, with my duffel bag and my looking like I'd been drugged through the mud, and which I had been, and the guy goes, "Oh man, you've been at Woodstock?" And I go, "Oh, yeah." He goes, "Oh man, tell me all about it, man." He's a younger guy. He was all excited. He wanted to know all about it. I go, "Yeah, I was up there listening to a lot of music. Kind of rain, and we had a great time." I bet he was really impressed that I was there. And I go, "Well, maybe this was a bigger deal than I thought." And so I took the train up to my town. I walked the I got there about 7 in the morning and walked up the hill about a mile away to my house and walked in. And my mom and dad always had breakfast in the kitchen about that time while my dad was getting ready to go to work. And he always leave right around 8 o'clock, 7:45. And so I can walk it in, and the screen door was open. And screen door was open, screen door was there. I just opened the door, and the rule was, don't slam the screen door. I mean, how many times, 1,000 times I heard that as a kid, right? So of course I walked in and slammed the screen door. And so my mom, the floor plan was like a square where it was like a track running around the first floor. And so the kitchen was back at the far corner from the front door. And I guess my mom heard the screen door slam. And she thought, it's got to be my kid, scream slamming the door. But she came running around the corner. I don't think her feet were touching the ground, because they hadn't heard a word about it. All they'd been seeing was on the news about the hippie fest mired in mud, and then up there. And they didn't know if they'd ever hear from me. They thought I'd be like Charlie on the MTA, that he never returned. No, he never returned. And there I was. And so she hit me with a crossbody block, essentially. It's like I had just gotten home from World War II. I mean, she was so excited to see me.
Oh, yeah.
And so anyway, and my dad said, "Hey, nice to see you." So I got ready and went up, took a quick shower, and threw away the Woodstock tickets apparently, and walked down to our town where the train station was for my dad to go into New York, and I just went to my grocery store and fixed the produce department for the morning, and of course the guys showing up there, these guys who were all kind of, cross section of New Yorkers, have been giving me all sorts of crap about going up to with all the hippies up in to this music festival, and now I'm the returning hero. I'm a celebrity, So I spent the next 3 days, they'd say, Mrs. Jones would come in the store and said, "Hey, that my nickname was College Boy." He'd say, "Hey, college boy, come here." And he'd say, "He was at Woodstock. Tell Mrs. Jones about your rip." So I had to tell all the matrons of our town, about my adventures at Woodstock. So
a special thanks to Quincy Stringham for sharing his Woodstock experiences, and I hope you enjoyed getting to know him. He's one of the best boomer buddies a guy could have. I'm Rick Reed from my Boomer Buddies podcast. I want to thank you all. Please join us again. Tune in on Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcasts. And until then, we'll see you around the block.